Hello and a very warm welcome to the YouTube channel Undoubting God, where I share evidence for God, defend Christianity and discuss issues related to the Christian faith. This is the third video in a series of short videos about the existence of God. And in this video, we're going to look at why mathematics and morality point to a divine designer, what we call God. First of all, let's look at the laws of mathematics. Now, mathematics is known as the universal language because not only does it describe patterns, it enables effective communication and it has universal applicability. But where does mathematics come from? How did we get it? And more importantly, what does this have to do with God? Well, let's look at a simplified argument for why mathematics requires God. There are four premises and there is a conclusion. Okay, so let's look at each premise one by one. So, premise one, the universe follows precise mathematical laws. We know this. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, you can do mathematics regardless, and everybody across the entire planet will get the same answers as assuming they do it correctly. Right, so that's the first one. Premise two, these mathematical laws are highly ordered and they are consistent. They're highly ordered and consistent. Again, we get the same answers wherever we are across the world. So I don't think people will argue with premise one and two. Now, premise three and premise four, there's going to be some debate. So let's look at premise three. The existence of order and consistency suggests design or purpose. Now, some people might argue, well, we don't need to have order and design for there to be a designer, but I think it's still extremely plausible to come to the conclusion that if there is order and consistency and some kind of design, there is a designer. So it's not implausible at all. Premise four, design or purpose implies the existence of a designer or some kind of lawgiver. Now, we call them the laws of mathematics. It's the language of the universe. Pretty much everything we know about the universe can ultimately boil down to mathematics. You know, physics and chemistry and all different kinds of mathematical applications. So, again, I think there's going to be a lot of pushback against this, why there has to be a designer or a lawgiver. But again, I think given the evidence, given we're looking at the facts, it's logical to assume that because we have these very precise and orderly laws, or certainly there seems some purpose behind them, that there is someone driving this design, or some mind or some intelligence driving this design. So the conclusion, okay, therefore, it is most plausible that God established these mathematical laws. Now, again, there's going to be a lot of kickback from the last one. Why does it have to be God? Well, I think as we've gone through the different premises, I think that because they're orderly, because they're consistent, like they are repeatable, they're extremely precise. Extremely. And mathematics is such a wide, vast subject. Why would it exist? Why is it so precise? It seems to me that there is something or some mind behind it that's programmed it or designed it to work in a very specific way, and in a way that we can learn more and more about the universe. So again, I don't think it's fairy tales or delusion to come to the conclusion that because we have the laws of mathematics and they always work, they don't go on strike, they don't say, no, I'm tired, or, you know, you don't appreciate me enough, I'm going on strike. Now, the laws of mathematics don't that, just like the laws of gravity and all other natural laws we have. They just keep on working. So I think it's not implausible in any way to think that mathematics has a mind behind it. Now, I want to go a little bit deeper into mathematics and all other subjects that are based on mathematics, especially physics and chemistry, etc. And the whole scientific approach is basically relies on mathematics to a very large extent. But I want to go a little bit deeper. So if we actually think about it, we know that the universe had a beginning. Now, what most people don't know is that if we go back in time, because the universe is expanding out, right? It's expanding out, right? From a tiny singularity we call the Big Bang, and expanded and expanded, expanded, and it's getting faster. It expands, seems to be getting faster, okay? Getting further away. Now, if we extrapolate that right back to the very beginning, okay? Just literally a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a second after that initial singularity, that initial bang, or I guess we could say rapid expansion, whatever you want to call it, a tiny, 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 tiny fraction of a second after that, the laws of physics burst into life. This is what's known as called Planck time. Because if we go backwards, right, at that point, this like Planck time, the laws of physics cease to exist. They don't work. And of course, physics requires complex mathematics. So it seems that mathematics and physics and all the laws, like laws of gravity, or the constants, all those kind of things, they didn't exist until at that particular point, a tiny, 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 minuscule amount of time after that Big Bang. So because time and space and matter and laws and natural laws, they didn't really exist until the Big Bang, whatever caused the laws of mathematics and gravity, etc., has to be outside of time and space and matter. In other words, there has to be a transcendent lawgiver outside of the universe, and that is what we call God. Second, let's look at why the moral law or morality point to God. Now, have you ever had a guilty conscience? Be honest, I'm pretty sure everybody will say yes. Now, we've all done things that we know that we shouldn't have done, or we did things, so we didn't do things that we should have, and as a result, we feel this guilty conscience. Now, where does that guilty conscience come from? Is it because we've been taught that certain actions are bad, and we're just reacting to our teaching, right, to what we've been taught? Or is it because that there is a transcendent moral law that's somehow written in our consciousness or in our psyche, or however you want to frame it? Is that what we are measuring our good and bad actions against? Now, of course, we are taught things as we are growing up. You know, we're taught to distinguish certain actions, okay? But I think it's quite interesting that everybody knows, right? And I'm talking about knows like from within their very core of their being, that certain actions are wrong. Things like stealing, like taking advantage of people, like murder, physical abuse, and all these terrible things. People just know it's bad. I don't think they know they're bad because, oh, somebody told me and I listened to them and I happen to agree with them. No, I think it goes deeper than that. The human situation is that we have these certain moral laws that are kind of like embedded in our programming, so to speak. So I think that's one reason why moral law points to God. In the book Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis informs his readers that he actually came to the realization that God exists. Why? Because there was evil. Now this is quite interesting because many people seem to think that because there is evil and pain and suffering in the world, that this points away from God. But C.S. Lewis came to the startling conclusion that actually because there is evil, and he knew intuitively there was evil, he knew evil was real, but how did he know what he called evil was real? He writes in the book, "My argument against God was that the universe seemed so cruel and unjust. But how had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe with when I called it unjust?" In other words, C.S. Lewis is saying that because he had experienced, he had seen, he had witnessed it, he'd felt it, evil, right? And he's not just talking about knowing it intellectually. He's talking about because he'd seen it, witnessed it, experienced it, he'd lived, in it. Maybe he even had evil happen to him. But because he'd experienced evil, he knew it was real. But what was he measuring it or comparing this evil against? There had to be, in his conclusion, a transcendent lawgiver for us to objectively know if something is evil or is good. In other words, in order to tell right from wrong, in order to have good morals, so to speak, in order to right from wrong, to know good from evil, there has to be a standard outside or transcendent of the human condition. So that's why he came to the conclusion that because evil exists, right and wrong exist, morals exist, objective morality is true, we know them, it's written in our hearts or embedded in our psyche, however you want to term it. He knows, or he knew, I guess you could say, these laws were outside of the human condition. So, to conclude, mathematics and morality both point to a designer. Laws require a lawgiver. I think that's just plausible. So the next time someone says there's no evidence for Christianity, you can just explain to them that there are many reasons, two of which are that mathematics needed to have a designer, and that morality, that we know certain things are wrong, not just because we've taught them or that they've evolved, we know deep down in our conscience that certain actions are wrong. So that is why mathematics and morality point to God. Now, if you enjoyed the video, if you found it to be enlightening or interesting in some way, please, you know what to do. Subscribe to the channel, comment on the video, like the video, share the video, and remember, faith is not fairy tales and God is real.